case people want to come in and hang out and stuff.
Well,
And that's basically the gist of it, but it's pretty laid back. Um, I started going through your like work obviously just to like get ready for it, and like, dude, I can't. It's so insane to me that like so many of you guys are like slept on as much as this, where like your whole portfolio is insane, bro. Like it's amazing.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, it's just nuts to me. I mean, like I'm happy that this whole, you know, Renaissance time frame is kind of like happening for you guys, where it's just like, you know, I mean, did you? I don't know, like for the Into the Spider Verse thing, like, is that how you met Jonathan Winbush, or like is that like,
Me and Jonathan go back. It's funny, we've never actually met in person, but and we've never actually even worked together. But we're in the same space, the same industry, same niche, doing very, very similar things. So obviously, like we rub up against each other online and chat and kind of pick each other's brains on stuff. And yeah, me and Wimbush have gone back. We've done podcasts like episodes together. And yeah, man, we've been chatting back and forth for years now. But
that's awesome.
we do very similar work in same industry, and so obviously we connect a lot on
That's
different
awesome.
stuff. So we do very similar.
Okay. I got AV going. I'm just gonna make the Twitter post, but I mean, like everybody that Jonathan's put me in touch with is just like amazing. I just if you wanna retweet it, I'm just gonna put, going live. I I need to build this new computer, man. The V key on my the V key on my keyboard is broken. Like I got everything sitting waiting, and I'm waiting on like a 3080 to come in. I'm hoping for trying to make a purchase on a 3080.
Oh man,
Don't have one. I have a 3070, but I feel like as soon as I build the computer with the 3070, I don't know. I just live a life where like things just happen like that. Where like I could wait like a month, and the day that I decide to build it, the 3080 is gonna like drop into my lap. Um, and so yeah, I am trying to like avoid that, and I've been waiting like a month and a half, and this computer needs to like go and just out to pasture. I don't know.
no, I feel you on that. That's I've experienced that multiple times as well.
Yeah, it is what it is. Like it just is what it is. Like there's no other way to say it. All right, so we'll hop into it. I guess so. You want to introduce yourself and then just kind of like talk a little bit about how you got started.
Yeah, man, absolutely. My name is Handel Eugene. How I got started just in creating art, basically digital art. Man, it goes back to uh, high school. Wasn't creating art at the time, but I was guess it's kind of like the earliest time that I was kind of being creative. Uh, I uh, I took TV production in like the 10th grade, and I took it for 3 years, all the way up until senior year. And it was just a easy A for me. It was like a class that was super chill, like not a whole lot of effort needed. And they had a couch. I remember they had a couch in the back of the classroom, so it was like, oh, this is a super chill class, super fun. And I think just like senior year, I got into high school. I was like, man, I had like this quarter life crisis, which I don't know in hindsight, I have no idea why this occurred to me, but for some reason in my mind, I believe that oh, I'm supposed to be going to college next year, and when people go to college, they know exactly what they want to do and who they want to be in their life. And for me, I was like, I have no idea what I want to do, and I was like, well, let me just try and pick something. It's like I've been kind of doing this TV production thing, even though I've been slacking off. I've been kind of learning some things here and there, so I decided to try and take that seriously. And my senior year, I'm like, all right, let me try and show some initiative and try and get better at the stuff. And maybe this is what I want to do. And uh, my TV production teacher did something for me that I'll never forget, and it kind of really was like the catalyst for my career. He saw that I was taking more initiative and kind of trying to learn and get better and do some extra things, and he gave me a title, which is probably the greatest one of the greatest gifts anybody ever gave me was a title of like executive producer of Terry TV. This is in Tampa, Florida, and at Hillsborough High School, and his name is Joe Humphrey. I'm forever indebted to him. Uh, just that simple title is like, oh wow, I got this title. It was like this the most prestigious thing I ever was given. Like, oh, I got this title now, and I got to kind of live up to this title. And so that just gave me extra fuel to my fire. Uh, Fast forward ahead, I'm creating video highlights, doing editing and everything like that, creating videos for the morning show and everything like that, and started to get better at it. Doing football highlights, it actually was kind of like my thing. Um, I would do football highlights every week. I'd record a video, a football game on a Friday, edit it all, spend all weekend editing it, and released it on Monday. And it got to the point where it was so funny because students were expecting, like, on come Monday morning, they want to see the video highlights from Friday's game. So I did that like 12 times, I think 10 times that year, or something like that. And I got better with each week. I tried to get better, tried to make them better, tried to make them like ESPN quality, right? And That was really kind of like the beginning of like my art journey. Just kind of creating fun little video highlights. I did end up going to college. I went to University of Central Florida. Went there for 2 years. I ended up dropping out actually because um, I had a job. I had a job at UCF Sports Video, and UCF Sports. I got a job there based off of the work that I did in high school, which is pretty cool. And that's where I met my first After Effects artist. And there, that's when like the kind of like the Pandora's box really opened up for me, and he showed me a whole new world. I at first I just picked up After Effects to try and like make my video highlights better, but it just again it's once I started diving more into that, I was like, oh wow, there's a whole world that like of possibilities here, and um, so I started learning from him, and I started spending so much time like at this job and like learning all these cool new things that I completely neglected my classes and my grades, and I eventually got kicked out of school. And I tell people I transferred. I transferred to Full Sail University, which is an art school. But really, truthfully, I honestly dropped out, and I kind of had like I was at a crossroad. I was like, all right, what do I do now? Do I go back home and maybe go to community college, or maybe I don't know, find a regular job, or do something else, or do I try and pursue this thing that I'm kind of good at and got like a spark for? And I decided to kind of put a little bit of a bet on myself and be like, all right, if I'm going to do this, let me just go all in. And so I went to art school at Full Sail University, and that's where I really kind of honed my craft and got better, learned as much as possible, really grind and hustle. I always tell people I never worked as hard as I've ever worked in my entire life than I did when I was like 20, 21, um, 19. Those years were like my hustle and grind years, and I didn't create amazing work, but I created enough, got good enough to be able to land a job in the industry. That's kind of like how I got into this whole thing, starting all the way back from pretty much creating video highlights in high school to learning After Effects in college to going to school for it at Full Sail University, and then landing a job, an internship in LA in 2012.
That's awesome, man. Do you still feel like you like kind of hustle after learning new programs and like, techniques and stuff like that, or are you just kind of like sitting back with like what you have and kind of trying to more like refine what you do have?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm always hustling. I'm always, I don't know if hustle is the word I can use now. It's more so just still working, still honing my craft, still trying to get better. Um, um, Definitely not working as hard as I was back then. I mean, it was like 24/7 back in college, but obviously I've got a life now. I've got a family and kids, which is great, which is amazing because it keeps me from being that, because I can definitely get obsessive with this kind of stuff. I can definitely get like, you know, I've got a little bit of a workaholic nature to me, but my family keeps me honest. So, but I'm still very much trying to improve and hone my craft. I'm still doing tutorials. I'm still doing personal projects. I'm still like looking for the right opportunities to take on that will help progress and push my career to the next level. Still very much in like the improvement and kind of like student of my craft. Still very. I don't think I'll ever really lose that. I always um, try to improve and get better. I think part of me as an artist that and I actually kind of like had some self-reflection on like, man, why is it that I do that I do? Why am I still like after 10 years still trying to push and become better at what I do? And I kind of like had a self-reflection moment, and I realized that like a part of me is like, man, if I continue doing this, like if I've gotten to this point, it's taking me 10 years to get to this point, like imagine where I'm gonna be at if I continue doing this in 10 years from now. Like a part of me is like, man, like I'm terribly curious and interested in seeing like, where I'll be 10 years from now if I just continue pushing my craft. Because I'm finally at the point where I'm like kind of liking my work, and like not like I'm enjoying the work that I'm doing, and I'm thinking the work that I'm finally creating work that I'm proud of. And I feel like, man, 10 years from now, if I continue doing this, then man, where will my work be at that point? And that gets me excited. That gets me motivated. That gets me going. Like, man, I want to continue to evolve and continue to perfect my craft and get better. So, yeah, that's my whole mindset mentality towards it all.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand like the drive to get better and stuff like that. It's definitely I kind of go down that rabbit hole. I was actually talking to my dad, and I don't know. He like read through. This is a weird segue, I guess, but he read through
Oh,
this
good.
this I don't know if it's symptoms or like traits of people with like autism and Asperger's, and he thinks that he might be somewhere on the spectrum because of like how obsessive he is. And I'm like, I don't know if that like I don't like like I think that that's kind of like a fine line. My cousin is autistic, and I mean very little, very nonverbal, but like he knows Japanese, learned it all on his own, right? Like insane. Can write it, speak it, understand it when it's said to him, right? So like my buddy has a Japanese fiance, they're gonna get married in like a month. She said happy birthday to him like on the phone, and he goes thank you, and like that was it, right? But like crazy, right? And so like he's obsessive about drawing and stuff, and so like I don't know, I really wonder if that's like almost like one of those strengths of the disability kind of thing, um yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a trait that I feel like you've got to have to be good at your craft, because like I think it's a weird aspect, but I think the best artists aren't satisfied, and they're always trying to look for like something to improve, something to get better. Like you mentioned, like you said, kind of being obsessive about things, always trying to be like, oh well, what happens if I do this? Or like, oh, maybe this could be better, and like exploring and pushing it. In a lot of ways, I think you don't really look back and appreciate your work until like, I don't know, long after it's done, because while you're in the weeds, while you're in the trenches, you're always looking for like, all right, how can I improve this? How can I get this better? And those are the best artists. I guess it's like um and like some people like have like a gifted and cursed kind of aspect relationship with it. It's like and I think there's definitely a balance to it, but the best artists, the best people at anything in the world are have that obsessive quality towards it, where like they'll never reach perfection, but they're always striving for it, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. I'm curious, like, obviously we're kind of a little bit post nuclear blow up of like the NFT space, right? And
Yeah.
it is what it is. Like I have very little worries about the space. I think that this is a paradigm shift, right? Like even if like the money is not currently here, like I have very little nervousness, but uh, honestly, kind of that conversation is happening every day on Twitter. I'm
Yeah.
kind of like a little bit more interested from like your take, right? Like you guys are, like After Effects artists or, like the creative side of like the movies and stuff like that. And I'm gonna go through your work too, right? Which is incredible. I mentioned it too when we first hopped on the call, but was there like a mental shift as far as like, okay, I'm like the FX guy or like the animator for movies and stuff like this and advertisements and all of that, right? Like all of your repertoire, and then now into more of like I'm an artist, like is that like a mental shift that you went through, or like how has that like this whole NFT space like changed your mental on the situation?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think Part of me has always, looked at me and my work as an artist. In a way, it kind of I'm an artist that like a client or a studio comes to solve problems. And so that's definitely its own kind of avenue, and it's not the traditional artist route. But I definitely consider myself as an artist. But uh, and throughout my whole career, I've always been trying to find my voice. And I think as a commercial artist, it's a little bit hard because in a lot of ways, you're solving problems for other people. And so that's why for me, like I always felt it was important to kind of, preserve my creative integrity by working on my own work. So that way my voice doesn't get lost in the shuffle. And so that's something that I've always tried to keep track of is, making sure to develop my voice on the side. And like, I think it's very easy as a commercial artist to just do your day job and work at your day job and just do the work that comes to you, because that already takes up a lot of your time. But I think for me, I wanted to continue to grow as an artist individually and have my work speak for itself and represent me as an individual. 'Cause a lot of times the work that in the commercial realm is work that you create in conjunction and collaboration with other people, which I enjoy a whole heck of a lot, and I've gotten the opportunity to collaborate with a ton of other people, which is amazing. But and my portfolio demonstrates that. But at some point you want to get to a point where you're creating art that represents you, and your ideas and demonstrates um, your creativity. Becomes sometimes when you're working with client work, you kind of have those limitations and those constraints that you have to stay within. So um, very much at the beginning, it was just all focused on, I want to say majority focused on like trying to become the best commercial artist I can be. And when I say commercial artist, I mean basically becoming an artist that can solve creative problems for clients well, efficiently, and create interesting, engaging work. But I want to say about midway through my career thus far, I started to try and pivot a little bit more and start focusing more on personal work and creating interesting artwork that appeals to me and kind of appeals to me and my background and my taste and such. So this is something that's been brewing, for a bit. Um, for a while actually before the NFT space kind of blew up. But I think the NFT space for me is something that like supercharged it a little bit and kind of helped me, um, even incentivized it a little bit more as well. Like, a lot of, and so I think very much have considered myself an artist from day one. It was just more so a matter of like demonstrating that more often than not, because obviously you've got your day job and you've got the work that you do in collaboration with other people. But definitely more recently I've been taking more time and investing it back into myself and my work and my art, so that way I can demonstrate more so of like my artistic individual creativity.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I don't have a creative bone in my body as far as like what I can get on paper, but I like to think that I speak decently. I'm
Well, the fact, no, man, the fact that you've interviewed so many people, and you've got like so many, I've got so many good friends that you've chatted with and you talked to, and so you're rubbing up against some really high quality, high top tier talented artists, which is really cool, and that kind of like speaks for itself, with you and your work and what you're doing. So I mean, I just want to give a shout out to you. Thank you for doing these and setting these up, man. This has been a really inspiration, really fun just following along, seeing some of the podcast that you've done. So
Thanks, man. I like I just honestly I haven't done it in a while. I told you I ended up we both had some scheduling conflicts. I got my shoulder surgery, and then you had a kid, so congratulations on I'm is it your second kid or
it's funny you asked. It's my third kid.
nice, man, nice.
Third, yeah, yeah, man. I'm grateful and blessed to be able to have um these kids in my life because man, they keep me honest, they keep me humble, they're like my life, man. They're my social life in a lot of ways. I always tell my wife this, like you and my kids are like my social life because if it wasn't for you, I would have probably been like hunched over on the computer 24/7. So I'm glad glad they're here for me.
That's awesome. I wanted to pull up. So I remember you posted Spring Circles, and then you hadn't animated it yet. And like, I just want to say that I love the rotation, the pivot, the colors. Like, it's amazing.
Thank
I originally thought that you were gonna do butterflies with it. I'm not gonna lie. I know that that's like a weird take, and like after like now seeing it in front of me, like I almost can't see that anymore. But like the the four different pieces that interconnect, right? Like I almost imagined that those were together and then that was gonna like flutter away. But man, like it's just it's so smooth. It looks awesome.
Oh man, I appreciate it. It's funny you mentioned butterflies because I have a whole project kind of like um drafted up, put together like in the queue, basically based off of something similar, a similar idea. Because you have like a group of butterflies called a kaleidoscope, which I thought was pretty cool. I was like, oh, when I learned that, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So I wanted to try and play off of that. So yeah, like imagine seeing like a whole group of butterflies like on a tree and everything like that, and they're kind of like slowly flapping their wings like that. Just in general in my head and just the way I visualize it could be so interesting. So it's funny you mentioned that because that's something that's on my agenda of projects to hopefully tackle in the near future.
It's awesome. Do
That's
you?
amazing you see that because I didn't see that, but that's so cool that you mentioned that. I can definitely see that being the case.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where like before you animate something, right? Like you don't know which direction it can go, right? Like I imagine that like some of the pieces could have like started stacking up, right? Like maybe they were like little towers and stuff, right? Like just stuff like that. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah, yeah. It's funny the path that you go down because I originally had the design in my head. I was like, man, how the heck am I going to animate this? And it was a little bit of a exploration and freestyle towards it, for sure. But I came in with a pretty loose idea of how I wanted it to move because it's interesting because I consider myself as an artist, but not the traditional artist. A lot of ways I start off with motion. Things in my head are always whenever I see things or visualize things or see things out in the world or just geometric shapes just in general. It's like I in my head automatically visualize them and see them moving. Because that's just my background and just kind of where I come from. I started off as like I mentioned, I started off as an editor. I started off with a camera in my hand. I started off, then I went into animation, and then I kind of progressed into the traditional art sense, or I should say digital art world. So that's my background.
Yeah. Have you ever seen those edits of like I'm a huge UFC guy. I know Jonathan Winbush is too. I don't know if you are, but there's those edits of like the different like highlight reel or like highlight knockouts where like the person will like be like an anime character or something like that. Like one of them is like the guy going Super Saiyan, so like he like
Yeah,
puts on you've seen those?
yeah. Those are awesome.
I feel like that's like a an amazing take on like just different VFX that you can kind of like add into things, right? Like it's so clean and like they always get reposted, right? Like it's an instant viral.
Yeah. No, I've definitely seen those videos. It's funny. I'm not the biggest UFC fan, but I've seen that translate to a bunch of different sports. Like you see that in a lot of different areas. I'm a big basketball fan, but big football fan. Um, and you'll see some of those elements and those graphics and those basically footage, graphics over footage, overlaid on top of like, like you mentioned the cell animation. You've got like graphics. You've got all kinds of fun little elements that you can play sprinkle together, using that formula. It's a really fun. It's really fun. I've got like a Pinterest board saved full of like those type of stuff that like are really fun and cool.
Is there so on the topic of that, right? Like, is there other social media things that like you utilize to have like brainstorming sessions, right? Like, I'm imagining that Pinterest is kind of like an inspiration kind of thing.
Yeah. Pinterest is like my number one platform, I want to say, for gathering ideas. Um, I like it because it's not like, you know, um, I think Instagram and Twitter, the people put forth their best foot forward in like portfolio quality stuff. And like for me, I'm interested in like the deep diving into like I don't know architecture, the things that aren't a little bit outside of my field, like things that aren't in my feed, things that are like I guess the diamonds in the roughs, and such. So I think Pinterest does a really good job of like helping me find fun and interesting ideas that aren't necessarily natively in my circle, especially if I want to just deep dive in a completely different genre that I've never explored before. I think Pinterest does a really good job of helping me find really fun, cool ideas in that realm. And honestly, I think just as an artist in general, uh, for me, I try to look in areas that are unconventional and things that like aren't mainstream and aren't super popular, because I feel like that's where you can find some of the freshest ideas, even just outside the computer in general, just being inspired just out in the world. Photography is really big for me because it helps me, it forces me, well, not forces me, but helps me get away from the computer without, and still allowing me to be creative,
Mm.
at the same time. So I'm like being inspired by what's out there and kind of bringing what I see out in the world into my work and my art. So yeah, it's definitely different. Like shoot, like there's I people probably sleep on Flickr. Flickr's got some really fun stuff. I'm a big Tumblr user. And I'm probably in the minority here, probably not a whole heck of a lot of us out there, but I still find lots of fun, cool, engaging content on there. That's just not the you know viral trendy type of work that you'll see, but it's like super interesting and engaging, and it's unique and it's fresh to me. um I find inspirations from you know looking at all kinds of, I try not to basically draw from the same well, I guess, is the analogy, trying to pull from different areas and different avenues.
I think that there's definitely like a lot of strength to that. This is a quick sidebar before I talk a little bit more about your inspiration. Who do you have winning the NBA playoffs?
Oh man. uh I am not a big fan of super teams.
Mhm.
I wish them success. I do wish them success, but not right away. I don't like the like, all right, we just already locked in a championship as soon as they like, I like teams that work for it and work hard for it. With that said, the Nets are definitely, I think, coming out of the East. Uh it's a toss up out in the West right now for me. Um I have a hard time seeing anybody being the Nets, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
because they haven't even kicked it. They haven't even like been full strength yet. They haven't even like played their best basketball yet. Uh, with that said, the next series, the Bucks and the next is going to be really good. If they can get past the Bucks, then I don't see anybody beating the Nets.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like right now I was expecting more dominance out of the Lakers, and then I know this is not, our talk, but the Knicks embarrassed me last night. One of the Knicks had on the Grinches, the Kobe Grinches, and he still lost. Like, just don't wear the shoes then, bro, if you're not gonna come with the A game, like. And then like the Nets, I've been saying I'm a New Yorker, right? Like I'm just happy New York teams are winning, right? Like period,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
I like the Knicks over the Nets, but if they're playing, I want the Knicks. If they're not playing, I want the Nets all day, right? Like that's just how I grew up, right? And I've been saying since I want to say I don't know, March, maybe April that they were going to win the championship. And that was
yeah,
like I want to say that I feel like their team is like a little bit different. Yes, the team was built, but the team was not the same as like the Miami Heat, where it was like we're taking the talents to South Beach. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't this like cohesive. It was like what a little bit different. I'm not saying that the team wasn't built, but it was built correctly, and it wasn't this like, hey, you're a superstar. I kind of want to play with D Wade, and LeBron James goes, yeah, I'll play with you, and then Chris Bosh, like no, little bit. I just hate LeBron.
well, it's for me. I'm a big fan of just great games and competition.
Mhm.
I'm not a fan of like stacking the cards, stacking the decks, and like these monopoly teams and big teams and everything like that. I'm not the hugest fan of that. I love underdog stories. I love Cinderella stories. Those are like my favorite type of like stories. Granted, I'm saying this as a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. We have nothing but if it's your team, if I can understand, if it's your team, then you'll take all the best superstars as possible.
Mm.
But uh, I wish the Nets success. I just kind of part of me was like I don't want them to. I want them to. I love again, we're going on some big tangents here, but I love the fact that the Dallas Mavericks beat LeBron James and the Miami Heat. And I'm from Florida. I'm a Florida guy, but I love the fact that they because it's an underdog story. It's like they were the Heat they were talking about sweeps and everything like that, and it was like a bit of a humility aspect to it. Like
Mhm.
I love the I'm always rooting for the Davids. That versus the Goliaths. Like and I'm sure the Nets will get theirs, but I just don't wish them success right away.
I feel you.
You think
Luka
so?
Doncic winning would be pretty sick. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't have any. If it has to be Luka, I'm pretty okay with that, right? Like I think he's, like, oh, we want to play the Dallas Mavericks, and then you lose 2 games on purpose, and then you get not so great games out of them. I'm
yeah,
pretty happy about it. And LeBron's a terrible loser, so like I don't know. I don't know. I grew up in the Jordan era, and so it's just like it's hard for me to root for LeBron when like he just doesn't have like the leave it all on the court aspect. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. It's different NBA. It's definitely different NBA from the '90s, man. That's for sure. Yeah, things you see today just don't won't fly back then.
Yeah, Trey Young with the flop after like he gets tapped and then he jumps and pretends to shoot. Like,
Yeah.
bro, come on. Like, whatever. We'll pivot back. In the words of every Knicks fan ever, fuck Trey Young. And so, but we will move back towards inspiration. I have to assume from the play piece building blocks that it came about because of maybe you stepped on your kids' toys or something like that. Is that am I am I accurate or?
It's funny. It's funny. I actually created that piece when I found out that we were going to be having our first baby. It's actually a little bit more towards like my childhood and that whole the play piece. For those who probably may not know or maybe familiar, may not be familiar, it's basically these building blocks that are animating and basically coming to life and animating in a fun, cool and creative way. It's like one of my favorite personal projects, mainly because it's there's this thing that's just kind of been nagging at me. It's like there was this saying I forget who said it or where it came from, but it was like my generation was the last generation to play outside. Like before like internet and like the phone and everything like that. And so a part of me was like, man, that's unfortunate. Like I see some kids today where like they'd rather watch TV or play on the phones or play on the iPad than go outside and or play with their toys or play with tangible things. And like so like and so a part of me is like, well, these some kids today probably are lost in this digital world and don't connect to things that are in the physical. So that's where that piece was kind of created. That's where the inception of that piece came from. Is like, I wanted to create a piece that somewhat is reminiscent on what it's like to play as a child with like fun physical toys and encouraging, however small, um, encouraging, kids today to continue to find inspiration and creativity and using their imagination to play with the things, physical aspects, physical toys, and playing outside or whatever the case may be. There's a pretty viral campaign that was pretty cool that I saw where it said that it was just a sign that was like on a park that said not available on the app store, and like or on a basketball court is a sign that said not available on the app store. It's like just this fun little campaign of just encouraging kids to play with toys. It's a simple premise, simple concept, but that's where that came from.
Nice, man. Yeah, I think I definitely agree. I mean, I will say that I definitely built those blocks too high and had them fall on me as a child. They had them not at my house, but at the doctor's office. They had like the legit wood ones and not like the small ones. And I definitely got hit by those, and those things hurt as a child. um, I'm curious, like from your progression through like working with all the different companies and just like the work standpoint, like at what point does I don't know if you went through like imposter syndrome or not, but like like at what point are you sitting there going like I got this. You know what I mean? Like was there like a specific like client where you were like, "Oh, they want me?" Like, "Oh, that like, you know what I mean?" Or something to that extent.
For sure, man. Man, I don't know if there's something that a freelancer um told me once when I was super young, and he shared with me, and he said something that was it's probably me asking the same question that you just asked me, a younger version of myself. I asked this freelancer who was like super talented and everything like that. He's like created amazing work. And he said something to me profound that I'll never forget. He said like, as soon as you start becoming comfortable and feeling like you know, you got this, or like, you're gonna crush it out of the park, that's when you start not creating the best work. That's when your work starts to that's when you've peaked essentially, because he's like, if you're not scared, a little bit scared, whenever you go into a new project or a new job or a new um initiative, then you're not really, pushing the envelope and really trying to create really interesting and groundbreaking, compelling work. And that should be the goal and what you strive for and what you do. So, to answer your question, essentially, like, whenever there, I don't think I've ever been over the moon confident whenever with the work that I've created. To be honest, a lot of the work that I create, some of my best work, I look back on it and like, dang, how the heck did I even pull that off? Like, because it was so hard. It was required a lot of like mental and emotional. There was a lot of mental, emotional roller coasters, and there's a lot of doubt, and there's a lot of, it's never smooth sail. There's never a project that I've created where I'm proud of where it was like smooth sailing. Like, where you just knock it out the park kind of thing. There's always some bumps in the road. There's always some doubts. There's always fear. There's always imposter syndrome. There's always the valleys. There's always a like, oh shoot, like, did I just make the biggest mistake of my life? I think one of the most significant projects I've worked on in my career, that I'm incredibly grateful to have gotten the opportunity to do, was work on Black Panther, at Perception Studios in New York. And when they reached out to me, I guess some people will like have like this, heck yeah, this in celebration, this like, all right, I've finally arrived, I'm here. I had like this crippling fear. I of course took the job and I was gonna be up for the task, but I had like this crippling fear. I had this like, dang, like, am I even good enough to be here? And it was the hardest project I've worked on in my entire career. Maybe probably because I put so much pressure on myself, but then also too, it was like very stressful and hard, and like required everything, all my skills, required everything, that all my knowledge, everything up until that point in time. It took everything that I had to complete that task and create it to the level that I felt like it deserved to be created at. So, I don't know if there's a point in time in my career where I can kind of be like, um, I got this, I've arrived. Because I don't know, I'm always striving and looking at like, where I could be, and trying to figure out how I can be better today than I was yesterday. Um, so I guess that just kind of keeps me honest. My whole thing is like, I think once you start looking back at your work and being like, um, you know, I'm doing great stuff, maybe then at that point in time, your best work is behind you and not in front of you. Um, because maybe then you become complacent, and that's like some of my biggest fears. Like, my fear is to hopefully just avoid becoming complacent and becoming satisfied and becoming happy. I'm still proud, very proud of the work that I've created. I'm very much, I'll still share it, I'll still show it, but I'm trying my best to, continue looking forward and continue trying to see like, all right, how can I make my next one my best one? How
Mm.
can I make, um, you know, the next thing I create the best thing that I've created,
Yeah,
and
man.
not relish over, past accomplishments. It's a balancing act, man. I want to say, like, I don't want to be up here and be like, oh, like, I don't look back and think of like some of the stuff that I've created, and I definitely am proud and definitely will show it and share it with people. And um, if I'm doing a conference or a talk or whatever, I'll definitely talk about it. But in the back of my head, I'm like, uh, make sure that the thing that you're talking about is the best thing you'll create in your career. Try and one up it.
Yeah, man. No, I mean it looks awesome. I'm a little curious, like from like a working standpoint, like how much of that is like storyboard and you make it into reality, and like them kind of just letting you run wild.
Yeah. Um, I guess I'll use Black Panther as an example. So that was definitely a collaboration. It was a definitely like Johnny Lepore, who's creative director at Perception, uh, and the guys there like they brought me in to collaborate with them on that project. In particular, the opening sequence. Uh, Ryan Coogler came to Perception and gave us a brief of like what they kind of the idea that they had, and working with Johnny to sketch out ideas. And in a lot of ways, those sketches for me and my job in particular was to sketch out rough animatics inside of Cinema 4D, inside of 3D essentially, basically running with whatever ideas that we think had that could be fruitful, and trying to quickly sketch them out in 3D and visualize them so that way we can take them back to the director and be like, hey, this is what we had in mind for that sequence. So it was actually an interesting process because maybe the creative process for other projects was a little bit more fluid and linear. This was a little bit more like, run and gun. And like, all right, we've got this idea. Let's try and uh, create a very rough MVP was the word, minimum viable product. Like try and create like, you know, a quick animation that can display what we want. It's that way, if we're liking it, okay, we can flesh it out further. If not, then we can quickly pivot into a different direction. So that was super fun, but very very challenging because it was like pretty much creating uh animatics. So I'm like doing these dynamic camera moves and bringing in this character over here and bringing in this scene and trying to find the transitions. The transitions was the hardest thing, like blocking out transitions in 3D at a relatively fast pace because the project was ever evolving. It wasn't like everything was set in stone and here executed. It was more like, all right, let's feel this out, let's flesh this out, let's try and find which I think is it's a harder process to go about doing it that way. But I think you find some of the best work by doing that because you're doing iterations and you're doing like evolving it and everything like that. You're not making the final decision necessarily on pen and paper. You're kind of like again feeling things out in 3D and like, oh, let's tweak this, let's tweak that, let's test this idea. So like, um, or what have you. So that's how that process went about. It was very much a collaboration. My role was very much trying creating the main animatic um, that would basically get eventually signed off from the director Ryan Coogler for sign off for production, which was pretty cool.
So, like at the time while you were working on it, like did you? Because I personally feel like Black Panther was like this monumental pivot or experience for like African American culture in America, right? Like from the response to like the stardom of like everybody in the movie, right? Like, did you feel that while you were working on it, or like was it kind of like it blew you away in terms of how big it exploded?
Oh man, it was. I was keenly aware of how monumental this project was at the time, to the point where like every day I walked in, my heart was like pumping super super fast because it's like I don't know. Again, that was part of. I probably put more pressure on myself than I needed to, but that was just always in the circulating in the back of my head to the point where like I had to kind of like block that out and like not think about how many people are involved with this production. Not only involved with the production, but are gonna see this. This is the first real big black superhero movie, and to have the honor to be able to be a small part of it, I carried a lot of weight on me, and I had to really block that out and like you know clear my mind sometimes because I was like, I gotta focus on the task at hand. And I was trying, it was weird. I was trying to be like, let me just treat this like, I would treat any other project and not try and overhype it. Because I feel like that could be counterproductive and work against me if I do that. So um, in basically yes, in production, very aware, very aware from the start, from the time I got the phone call. very aware of how big this project was, and to the time that I stepped into the movie theaters to see it the first time myself, like just experiencing it with the audience was super cool and super fun. And it was it's a to be honest, like I'm gonna have a hard time topping that project in my career, but uh, it's an incredible honor and incredibly grateful for that experience. And um, one of the things that I'm like incredibly proud of was the fact that it was unfortunate because I got to work on two films for Perception. I worked on Spiderman, but it was unfortunate because I wasn't unfortunately credited in the end of that movie. But second time around, I was like so grateful and so happy because they did credit me for the work that I did on on Black Panther. And I've got it right on my bookshelf back here. I got the DVD, the Blu-ray, I should say, with and that's something that I'm like incredibly proud of because that's something that I can show my kids and their kids and forever and everything. So like that's, um, I don't talk too much about that, but that's something that I think of a lot. Like um, that they'll be able to see that in the future, which is cool.
Yeah, man. Uh, you know, I can only imagine, right? Like from like the before, during, and after phases of that, right? Like just going through it. So I have a hard stop at 12, so I just like to ask two questions just to close out. The
Yeah,
first
man.
one,
Absolutely.
yeah. The first one is, if you were in my shoes, what question would you ask yourself?
What questions would I ask myself? Uh, I guess any advice on how to get to where I'm at, which is actually a question I get a lot and a question that I answer a whole heck of a lot. And uh, short answer, I guess there's a lot of tools that I used and a lot of like strategy. I guess not tools, strategies that I use to kind of get to where I'm at. But probably one of the most beneficial strategies that I've used to get to where I'm at, and that I'm still consistently using to this day, is I have a blog, and the blog is just for me. And this blog exists in an area that doesn't really have like social media influence. It's not something like I think with Instagram and sometimes with Twitter, it can be a little counterproductive because it's more of like, the social aspect of like sharing with others and like getting feedback from others. And sometimes the engagement can up or down, good or bad, can be counterproductive for your artistic journey. And I always tell people this. I'm super grateful that I got started in my art journey before Instagram because I feel like nowadays Instagram can taint some young artists, and really like discourage some young artists. And some people want to be have this false perception of being like successful like overnight or what have you. But I've been working at this thing for 10 years, over 10 years, um, now. And essentially, what I did was I created a blog back in college, and I tried to give myself a quota of like just doing 4 posts a month. Doesn't have to be finished. It just could be work in progress. It could just be just this something to keep me accountable to say like, hey, all right, I'm working on my craft. I'm continuing to evolve and get better, and like just doing 4 posts a month. Which was, some people are everyday artists, so they can create something every single day. That's something that I couldn't stick with. Definitely can't stick with now, but I can commit to all right, doing something, working on something, and posting it once a week. And it was something. It was just for me. It wasn't for the likes or the recognition or anything like that. It was just something for me to keep me accountable to say like, hey, I'm an artist and I'm committed to my craft, and this is the evidence of that. So you can go back to this day. I just actually early this year celebrated 10 years of me posting on my blog, which is pretty cool. I'm pretty proud of. It's the platform that I'm proud of the most because you can literally go back and see my artistic journey from now all the way up till 2011 when I first started my blog. You can see some of my early renders, some of my early work that's like super rough. But you can see my progression, and the fact that I've kept up with it is what it's kind of like my accountability as an artist to continue to grow and get better. And like this whole, like I always say, like, I never graduated when it came to school. I was always trying to, be a student of my craft. So having a blog, doing 4 posts a month, and like if I missed a month, it was like, to me, like glaringly obvious, like, okay, like I'm not, this just, like, how committed am I to becoming a better artist, and such. So like maybe I'll miss the post a month, I'll miss a month, so then I'll try and um make up for it the next month or what have you. So in the 10 years, um I've been on my block, I've only missed 2 months in the 10 years. So there hasn't been a month where I haven't posted um, something art related. And again, it's not on Instagram, it's not on Twitter. It's just a Tumblr blog that's specific for me and kept me accountable. Lots of other things that I did along the way that I could elaborate on, but obviously not enough time. So if there's anybody out there that's interested in other strategies that I've used, always reach out to me. I think, just in general, I think it's important to share that. Like, I'm always reachable. So if there's any questions or anything like that, um, you know, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, man. I think that that's definitely important. I'm curious. Last question, which whatever always has some fun responses, is what do you think your purpose is in life?
Man, what do you think my purpose is in life? It's a great question, amazing question. I've actually answered this question asked myself this question before. I think my purpose in life is to give back and give to others, and make an impact towards others, and make other people's journey easier than the journey that I had to get to this particular point in time. And basically, things that I've learned, things that I know, um, and give back in a multitude of ways. Give back, like if it's with inspiration with the work that I do, give back to the people that are in my lives, give back the to share what it is that I know, and and provide a bridge, if you will, towards getting towards your goals, and getting towards what it is that you want, um, out of life. Because I feel like I've been fortunate and blessed to be able to get to a position of, I guess, quote unquote influence. So I think it's my job and my duty to be available and able to, and other individuals who are trying to go down the same path, because Lord knows the amount of questions and the amount of people that I tried to hit up when I was first starting off in this journey. And man, for I don't know, for every, like, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 people that I reached out to, maybe only one person got back to me. And so it made my journey a little bit harder. So I try my best to try and, be that one person that will, like, reach back out and be able to answer questions towards individuals and share what it is that I know. Whatever it is that I know. If I always tell people, I'm an open book. Anything that I have that I know that's mine, it's like, I'm freely, willingly give it away. And information, yeah, it costs you nothing to give information out. What you know. So I'm a big believer in that. So um, yeah, basically using my platform and my influence, and um, where I'm at for good, and to give back to others in multitude of different ways.
Yeah, man. I think that's a great purpose. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you for doing these. These are amazing. These are awesome, man. Your inspiration for. I've definitely gone through and listened to. You've interviewed some of my favorite. You just interviewed James Ramirez, who's a good buddy of mine's, Fried Pixels, and lots of other good friends on here. So thank you so much for doing this, man.
Yeah, man. Having a blast. So I'm gonna keep doing it when I can. Happy we finally linked up for this. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, likewise, man. Hope your show is feeling better, man. I hope you had a speedy recovery.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Yeah, later.